Can you hear me okay? Let me know if you can hear me okay, because I want to make sure that you're at the right place. If there's any confusion as to whether or not you're at the right place, this is the Solomon Project. But before I continue, I want to make sure that you guys can hear me. It'll only take a few seconds. Hey, Daniel Berry! Cheers, cheers. Daniel, can you hear me okay, or do I need to do a supplemental move here? Let me know. Because, yeah, this is, oh, you can hear me? Okay, good. Hey! Richie! I'm gonna do a quick switch here, because I just want to check to see exactly how good the audio is. I just want to check to see exactly. All right, so it's good enough. It's good enough, y'all. All right, so it's good enough. Okay. So let's chat, y'all. I'm currently in the state of Kansas. We're headed to Texas. But we are currently in Kansas. The group by the name oh, right. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep that counts over here. I want to make sure you guys remember that. I get so much news. I get news through conversations with family members that are in the world of economics, friends that were professors. I get so much, and sometimes I can't, well, I mean, maybe if I didn't have a full-time job, maybe I could sit down and organize everything I want to say with regards to economics and finance and all that good stuff. I got a full-time job. Actually, it's more than a full-time. We truck drivers work on a 70-hour work week. Which I use up. I use up the full 70 hours every week. I thought that was a human being. I spent some time listening to a lot of Cuban music. Yes, Cuban music. And I listen to a lot of Cuban music because, unlike the music that comes from the island where my family's from, I'm going to call it Quisqueya. I'm going to call the island where my family's from Quisqueya. It's known for two names because it's governed by two separate sovereign nations. And the reason is because the colonizers were from two separate European nations. One was from France, the other one was from Spain. So on one side, it's the Dominican Republic, and on the other side is Haiti. But like I said, I don't care for that division, so I'm just going to call it what the Taínos, the original inhabitants of the island, called it, which was Quisqueya. Yes, Quisqueya. When the Spanish came over, they called it Hispaniola. But then the French came through, and they took half the island, or a little under half. Hey, Joe Peoples, how you doing? Yeah, so the French came through and they took a little under half the island. And hey, sunflower. So the original inhabitants, which were the Taíno Indians, who are part of the Arawak Nation, they called the island Quisqueya. Jamaica wasn't spelled with a J. It was something like Saimaka with an X, which is what the Taínos called it. Cuba was Cubanacan. Still had the word Cuba in there, but it was Cuba. Without the rest of it, it would be Cuba. But it's Cubanacan. Puerto Rico, which I jokingly call Powder Rico, and a friend who joined the military had a sergeant who had a hard time pronouncing Puerto Rico, so he used to call it Powder Rico. I jokingly call it Powder Rico sometimes. I'm surprised when I go on some of these Puerto Rican content creators, they don't get on my case or challenge me for calling it Powder Rico. They don't know what I look like. I don't use a Spanish name, so I wonder why they don't just call me out on that, calling it Powder Rico. But the Taíno called Puerto Rico Boriquen. You might have heard some refer to it as Borinquen, B-O-R-I-N. There was no N for the Taínos. The Taínos didn't call it Borinquen, they just called it Boriquen, without that N in the middle. And of course, the Spanish arrived. The Spanish were the first to arrive in those islands. And they were searching for gold to send back to the Spanish crown, because the Spanish had been in a war for 700 years against the Moors. So the Spaniards that arrived at the islands, they came with the intention of exploiting these areas for their gold, so that they can continue funding the war. It was at the tail end of the war, but in Europe, these nations used to borrow a lot of money to fund their wars. So even though it was the tail end of the war between the Spanish and the Moors, they still needed the gold to pay off the debts that for borrowing money to fund their war. They try to exploit the labor from the Taino, but when that wasn't yielding the results that they thought they should have had, they started bringing in Africans from all over the place along West Africa. Oh, you're a big fan of Emma Thompson? Yeah? Oh, wow. Okay. Super cool. The Africans that were brought to those islands, they came over with their musical instruments or musical influence, and they preserved more of their African music than here in the continental United States. If you listen to compa or merengue from Quisqueya, or if you listen to bomba from Puerto Rico, aka Boriquen, or if you listen to Cuban music, then you will definitely see just how dominant African music is in the music that's played in those islands, along with I think in Honduras also. Now with Jamaica's unique in that Jamaica's a Latin American country, but it's not known for that. Reason being is that the Spanish had control of the island of Jamaica for a very long time, until the British came in and did their thing. But in Jamaica, some of the towns still have Spanish names, like Ocho Rios. That's an example of a Spanish name. It means 8 rivers. Ocho Rios. Spanish Town. They got a place called Spanish Town. That should be obvious. How much of Jamaican music is still has a dominant African presence, because they listen to a lot of ska, or used to listen to a lot of ska, and then reggae came into the picture. I can't really say how much African is in reggae. Ska has British influence. I do listen to a lot of Cuban music, because I find the Cuban music a little more complex than the music from the island where my family's from, which is Quisqueya. They listen to merengue, bachata. I think compa is more, it's more modern, which is what the Haitians listen to a lot of. They listen to a lot of compa. It's a more modern version of what they used to play. I remember hearing a lot of Haitian music that sounded very similar to merengue. Merengue is probably from the Haitians, probably. It wouldn't surprise me if it was. We share from our African ancestry. We share we share the same bloodline, really. However, the Cubans, let me just say, bomba, which is played in Puerto Rico, bomba was a West African traditional drumming. However, it was prohibited by the Puerto Rican government for African drumming to be played. And it wasn't until the Haitians started migrating to Puerto Rico that the Puerto Ricans were able to reclaim that African drumming, and the name bomba resumed again. Because for a while there, they just about lost it. The Cuban music, the drumming, there's a greater variety of drumming and instrumentation in the Cuban music. It's a greater variety. Now, a lot of people use this umbrella term for Cuban music, and Cuban music, which also incorporates rhythmic patterns, rhythmic drumming from other African cultures that are not a part of the list of of the drumming that's used in Cuba. But they use this umbrella term, which is salsa. Lots of people have heard that expression, salsa. But salsa is Cuban music, and in some cases they have some mixture. Like, for example, you might hear a mixture of bomba drumming mixed in with the typical framework that salsa was born out of, which is the Cuban son. The Cuban son was created in the eastern part of the Cuban island, Santiago de Cuba. The instruments was the tumbadora, which some people refer to as congas, right? So you had the tumbadora, a single tumbadora, the marimba, which was an instrument made out of a box, and there's a cutout where there are pieces of wood left behind that when plucked made a particular sound that sounded like a bass. Or they would use metal like metal strips that would make it sound like a bass being played. So you had the tumbadora, you had the marimba, you had what people call the bongo. Although I'm not sure if the bongos that were being played were tuned to the same notes that are used today. But from the Cuban son, a variety of other specifically named compositions were made, and they fall under a specific name because of the different instruments that are being used, besides the basic ones that I mentioned, and the rhythmic patterns that are used. So they're more specific. To the average person that is being exposed to that type of music for the first time, they may not be able to distinguish some of the differences. But you got the son, you got son montuno, you got guaracha, you got mambo, you got guaracha mambo, you got Mozambique, you got there's one I'm forgetting. Mozambique. And something that's a part, but that's also incorporated in these different rhythms, is the use of rumba. Now, rumba has specific drumming and a specific tempo to certain drumming. It could be slow paced, medium paced, and fast paced. And this drumming was used during religious ceremonies, namely from the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. Or I'm not sure if the Yoruba also existed outside of that border that was created, because those borders didn't exist, those national borders. So Yoruba could have been outside of Nigeria. It could have been in Benin, could have been in Ghana, not sure. But the Yoruba had their own religious practice, and they prayed and danced and had music that was used to celebrate the Orishas. Those are their gods, the Orishas. Now the slow tempo for the drumming in rumba, that's called yambu. The medium one is wawanko, very popular. Wawanko is very popular, used in many compositions in this umbrella term called salsa, and rumba Colombia. Now, if you go to my community page, I have a video that demonstrates rumba Colombia. Now, rumba Colombia is more interpretive. You've got dancers that will interpret walking through the jungle with a machete in hand, cutting through the forest, slipping on some wet wood, encountering a snake, whatever. They play out through their dance. They play out a scenario, and in some cases, they even use Colombia to have a dance, kind of like what breakdancing was. In the community page, you'll find, I think it might have been a high school, where these kids are just hanging out, and a fight almost breaks out. So these guys got into a scuffle, but apparently they were from two separate groups, and they decided to stop the fight, and instead of fighting with their fists, they had a dance-off. You might find it interesting. So you got all these varieties, and you have something that's used to maintain the pace of the music. It's called the key. In Spanish, it's called clave. And you got more than one type of clave. If you go to somewhere like Chicago, New York, you might hear this one key, this one clave in particular, the son clave. Remember, son was like the basic framework of what all these other compositions are born of, with the exception of rumba, right? Rumba is something different. But you, like I said, within rumba, the guaguancó, you'll even hear people playing the basic guaguancó pattern on a bass. You'll hear something like tum 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 tum. That's supposed to be what the skins are tuned to. I think it's CG. CGGC. Yeah. Oh no, that last one wasn't C. But yeah, CGGC. I can't get it, but I think it's C and G. CGGC. I'm trying, but and you'll hear that being played in some compositions on like during a break or something. And as far as the dance is concerned that's associated with the Cuban music, again, people like using the term salsa. They identified that type of dancing as salsa. But in Cuba it was called casino. It wasn't called salsa. They've adopted the term just to let the world know that they understand what you're talking about. But they called it casino. And there's like it's not a line dance, it's a circle dance that they call casino rueda. Rueda means circle. Casino Rueda is fascinating. I learned to the point where I was able to teach it. And in Casino Rueda, what you do is you're all dancing. You got couples that are dancing in a circle, and back to the gum again. So all the partners execute the series of movements. Caller, according to the name that the caller shouts out, so everybody will be dancing. And as they're doing these arranged movements, they're also exchanging partners. Which is pretty cool. Which is pretty cool. Because you get to memorize certain moves, certain turns. It builds up your confidence. You execute timing. So that's Casino Rueda. And all the stuff that you learn in Casino Rueda are dance moves that you can use individually. Like if you were to go to an individual club and it's just you and your dance partner, or maybe you don't have your dance partner with you, you can still dance with anybody who dances the quote-unquote salsa. Within the world of salsa, you have people who dance on one and people who dance on two. The people who dance on two start slightly differently than the people who dance on one, but eventually the pattern becomes the same. On one, the men start with their left foot forward, and the ladies start with their right foot back. On one, you start on the first beat, it's the strongest beat. On two, you start with the first beat, but your left foot goes forward for the men. Your left foot goes forward on the second beat. That's why it's called on two. When the person playing the conga or the tumbadora is playing a specific pattern called the Mozambique, there's a point where the drummer slaps the skin and it makes a distinct sound. It usually occurs on the second beat. And that's something that people who dance on two pay very close attention to. For real, for real. If you're used to dancing on one or the other, it's just a question of letting your partner fit into that pattern. Left foot forward, right foot back. Once you guys make whatever adjustments you need to make, you'll fall right into the pattern and you'll be okay. Now, people who dance casino, they have some elaborate turning and locking arms, and that's something that people on two who dance on two may not be prepared for. And also people who dance on one, if you're learning through a Cuban, sometimes they will incorporate rumba moves that are used in rumba. Remember, specifically an arrangement that has to do with a specific deity, like Chango, for example. Chango has specific moves, and they might incorporate those moves into their repertoire, into their dance. People on tube call whatever they do shines, although Cubans also do shines, but they also like to incorporate their expressions that they use in rumba. I spent a lot of time listening to a lot of Cuban music. One, the intricacy, and two, the African foundation. Of course, there's a mixture of European music because they use European instruments. For example, charanga. When you listen to a charanga, the charanga has the son clave, but unlike the son, they use flutes and they use violins at the same time. There's two newer classifications. One is called songo, which was made popular by a band called Los Bambam, and then you have one called bimba, which was made popular by a band called NG La Banda. Los Bambam, they use violins, they use wind instruments, and they use the flute, which is something that you would find in charanga. However, the rhythmic pattern on the drum is what makes the songo distinct. Timba, born from NG La Banda, Timba uses flutes. I'm trying to remember if I heard them playing violin. No, they use, I don't remember them using violins, but they definitely use flutes. And they use the horn sections. They use the bass. They both use the bass, by the way. They all use the bass. The actual bass, they use the upright and they use the electric bass. However, in timba, the clave that they use is the rumba clave. This is the son clave. Very popular in the umbrella term, which is salsa. Rumba clave, you may not be able to pick up on it, but I'll give it a try. There's a longer pause in a different area. Almost sounds the same, but in timba they use that. Well, they actually use both, but they usually use the rumba clave. And it's fascinating because Cuban music fits in perfectly with jazz. So there'll be bands like oh my goodness, let me see if I can locate the name of that band. Oh, Irakere. Irakere is a Cuban band that dedicates itself to jazz, and they played with people like Dizzy Gillespie, for example. Did Miles? I don't know if Miles Davis got to play with them. And the musicians from Irakere are world class. world-class musicians. The entire group, they're incredible musicians. But it fits in perfectly. I think Chano Poso came here to the United States and played jazz with jazz musicians here while I was here. He was unalived here, I think, in Harlem. Chano was an aggressive individual, if I remember correctly. Not too long ago, another Cuban musician was unalived, but I think this was in Peru or Ecuador, one of the two. Tirso Duarte. A little bit of music history there from the Caribbean. Yeah, the Cuban music is amongst my favorite, amongst the favorite music that I like to listen to. And I like to watch content creators that react to music, a variety, everything from yacht rock to hip hop. And there's one critique I have for those who do music reactions. You'll have content creators that have a very low volume when they speak. So I raise my radio up so that I can hear what they're saying. But then when the music starts, boom, it blows out my speakers because the volume for the music is much higher than the volume that they're speaking in. So if you content creators get a chance, if you can, please try to make sure that your microphone volume is as close to the music as possible. I'm trying to preserve my speakers. Let's see how long I've been on this thing. 44 minutes, okay? Nobody's asking questions. Oh, some questions, here we go. How much do I earn? Doing what exactly? Doing what I do? I drive a truck. Skip it, no problem, okay? Well, yeah, I wouldn't want to reveal what I make. But other truck drivers, depending, if they're a company driver, they might be making something around $1,200 a week. Gross. After taxes, it all depends on their situation. It all depends on what they put on their before. Owner-operators could be bringing home, or could be grossing $2,500. People who have their own authority could be grossing a lot more. Although with people with their own authorities, you have to, and owner operators too, they have their own expenses. So after everything is all said and done, right now, after everything is all said and done, the difference between a company driver and an owner operator, for example, Might be who's that? Might be somewhere around $200 to $500 difference. Might be. Although things aren't very good in the trucking industry, we've been in a recession now going on 5 years. The rates that are being paid out are not that good if you take into consideration the insurance costs, fuel costs, and the insurance costs have been going up. We pay taxes in a large variety of things. So if anybody's considering getting into the trucking, this may not be a good time. Unless this is the only thing you can find. Yeah. So the activity in the comment section is low. Thank you to all who joined and commented and left your like and all that good stuff. And subscribe. Hey, thank you for subscribing. I'll leave you all with that. Don't forget, guys, in your pursuit toward your wealth, toward increasing your wealth, dress down and drive a bucket. And with that, stay fresh and keep it profitable, y'all.